Since they're not going to tell a story, I guess I might as well. Basically, like the Yamamoto, um, basically, um, one of the Japanese submarines basically tracked down Old Lumpy, as they called it, and there were actually four of them. These gasoline-powered submarines, basically. I think they only had like a 300 or 600 mile range, although they said the most they could get out of it was like 500 miles or something like that. And they leak like sieves, and they're noisy, and they're basically, like I say, air-cooled engines or whatever. And sometimes I think they would overheat or something like that, and they were just a problem, basically. Um, anyway, they built them. They used thin metal or steel or something. They welded it together, I think, or they were riveted together, and it wrinkled basically on them. That was the only shipyard that they actually had. The only submarines that the Confederacy actually had. They actually did have, like, by 1890, they had these submarines, and they're basically using them for piracy and all that other kind of stuff, and pretty much piracy to get the what's called the cargo. And they would just go up and they would try and get as much stuff off of these ships as they could. And one of them, I think the Yamato or whatever, tracked them down. It was a Japanese submarine, and it tracked them down. It was waiting for them to come out. And I think what they did was they went down deep. And the story goes is basically that he actually maneuvered underneath them and like was like nudging them up with his better submarine, like trying to lift them up, balance them, get in the middle of them, and then just kind of like hit them with the conning tower. Most people don't know, but the old conning towers were just towers. They weren't actually sealed. The actual seal was actually down lower. But you could still spring a leak, and it was still not a good idea to be ramming a submarine with with a conning tower. But anyway, though, I think the Yamato actually went underneath and got them about in the midsection and just kind of like started nuzzling them up, and uh, and I think they slipped off at some point in time. But he was like playing with them, um, basically trying to get them to go up, pretty much. I think something like that. The story goes like that, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure the details of it. I only heard it from the American side, or from the American side afterwards. But basically, Japan found them, and Old Lumpy, and they were pirating a ship or something like that, and he caught them. And anyway, though, they could only go down about 100 feet or 50 feet before it started oil canning, and it would start to leak like crazy too. The deeper they got, the more it would leak, because the rivets would leak, and it was a piece of crap, really. Um, Half full of water the whole time, or something like that. The Confederates would talk about walking around in like knee-high water from the leakiness of the submarine, basically. And there's these Confederate stories about how they were fighting for the Union, and working in knee high things, sweaty conditions, and the smell of the batteries. There weren't any batteries, though. They made like I say, the Confederates and Roosevelt made up all these stories about the old days of the Confederacy, and about how they fought for freedom and fought for this and fought for that. And like I say, the truth is the Confederacy lost, and the Republic lost completely. Roosevelt lost, Nixon lost, Jimmy Carter lost. They were all caught, and like they lost. And then they just made up all these stories and claimed like they were some big shots, or that they had won. Told stories. That's all they did. So anyway, and basically they've been renting the White House and the Washington D.C. building this whole entire time, and everyone basically knew what they were about and what they were up to. And pretty much, like I say, they bought my old subfleet. The submarines that they got in 1920 were my old subfleet, and I sold it to them. I mean, they were leaky like crazy, and they needed a complete overhaul. So I was like, well, they need an overhaul anyway, and that means you have to take out the whole back end. And I have some newer submarines, because I was gonna scrap them, actually, and they wanted them. They're like, we want them, we want them. I'm like, okay, you're not gonna do anything bad with them, though, right? I'm like, no. I'm like, okay, all right. And I think I might have welded up just to say no to them. I think I might have welded up the where the torpedoes go. I think I think that's what I did. I think I went and then I think I told my people to weld up the holes, and they stopped a lot of stuff from happening. I mean they wanted them complete, and I think my people went ahead and let them have them complete because like, well, we're just gonna watch you then. And anyway though, so like the United States Confederate, which kind of lived on but didn't really live on. Um, got my very, very old and leaky submarines and basically worn out. Like the engines were worn out, the main seal was worn out. I can tell you a list. The engines are worn out, the back main seal is worn out, the packing around the left tank is worn out. Lutheran Star, your used submarines right here. Yes, I know. Anyway, I sold them though. That was the thing. And they were old and leaky, and that's when they got them in 1930. And like I said, they tried to drive them, and they were driving them, and I think the engines had blow by like crazy, and I mean they were worn out. They had 60,000 hours on them, or something like that, or 120. No, I think they said that the submarines had 120,000 hours on them, so they were way worn out. And that back main seal was just blowing oil out or whatever. So the thing, like I say, I think it scarred the shaft. So they had to take out the whole shaft out of the back, which basically means taking apart the whole back end of the sub. And then you take the whole back end off. And I forget it. I don't think the engine goes with it. I forget exactly how it worked. We might have put that one on a rack, like I say. There might have been like this skid rack or something like that. I forget how it worked because there's like 5 or 6 different types of submarines that we had. One of them you could just you could take out the whole back end of the sub. It wasn't all that big of a thing. It was like a 3-day or a 2-week job basically. But I think the engines might have lifted out with the impeller or something like that. Like you take the tops, you take it apart or something. I don't really remember. We had one, but I think it leaked like crazy. I think it leaked too much. Anyway, though, but the point is that you take out the shaft and the engines had to be overhauled, and I think they had to spend like $120,000 or $250,000 for the maintenance work, and that was paid to my yard in like probably Russia. Actually, I'm not exactly sure. Either England or Russia. I only had 2 bases, or 3 bases up in there, or 3 dry docks. You take the sub in, set it down, and then they take apart the thing. So they got like $250,000 from the Republic for those in 1930 or whatever, and they did it as a private party. I didn't know the Republicans were a private party. Like, oh, the truth of it all is painful, isn't it? Well, they were murderers and killers. I mean, they would say, oh, no, we never did that. It's like, yes, you did. Or JFK did. Somebody sunk those ships with over 1,000 people on them. Those were real deaths. And those were the Republicans trying to come up on that. The stock market, too. Anyway, yeah, I guess that's about it about the Confederate Sea. And like I say, they lost like in like 1890 or so. They were running out of money, or 1750.